Olá, boa tarde, tudo bem? Bem-vindos aqui à nossa primeira edição internacional da Semana de Letras. Vamos começar com a primeira apresentação, que será em Linguística. Aprendizagem de phrasal verbs em inglês por adultos por meio de intervenções experimentais. Nós teremos como convidados a professora Claudia, Marcela e Juan, Camilo, da Universidade Católica Luiz Amigó. Okay. Hi, Marcela. Hi, Camilo. How are you?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm fine. You?
Okay, so welcome. Thank you very much for attending our session. We can begin. Marcela, will you begin? And then Juan, you give me a call when I will. Okay, so we are set.
Are you able to see my screen?
Marcela, are you going to project the slide?
Yes. Can you see it now?
I can't.
It says that
Você
it's
ajuda eles a
sharing.
projetar o slide?
I'm trying, but let me try something. Because
Marcela,
okay,
can you find how
I'm
to share
projecting.
the slide?
I'm projecting my screen now.
It's on the system.
It says I'm projecting it now. For some reason, it's not. Let me try something different. I'm going to try to share the presentation on another. It's processing the presentation of the slides. Give me just one more minute.
Marcela, can I help you?
Yeah, for some reason, it's not allowing me to upload. It's
Are you
processing
seeing
the
the program in English or Portuguese?
No, in English. But it says it's still processing the projection of the slides. Okay, I think.
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes. Good, great.
That's great. All right, so yes, Candice, sorry. Thank you very much for joining us today. What we are going to present to you today is a research proposal that Dr. Glenday, Professor Juan Camilo, and myself, we have projected for next year. It's called Syntactic Learning of English in Adults Through Structural Chunks. So the order of our presentation, we're going to discuss adult EFL learning. We're going also to consider why syntactic chunks and why did we choose them for this particular research. Then Dr. Glendale will move on to methodological considerations, the hypothesis and the research method. And Professor Juan Camilo and myself we will share the expected outcomes of this research and conclusions before we can move on to any comment or question they have for us. So let me start by introducing Professor Juan Camilo, who is going to talk to us a little bit about adult EFL learner. So Juan Camilo, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you all for being here today. It's a pleasure to be here in this event, Semana de Letras. We are excited to share insights on this research. And I would like to start talking about the adult EFL learning. And I would like to mention some important factors we want to bear in mind in our research. To start, I would like to mention some relevant details about motivation, because motivation is one of those important elements we want to consider here. And I think everyone here is an adult, and I believe we all agree on the importance of motivation for learning something. In that sense, one of the most crucial factors for achieving learning is precisely to foster that aspect. So I think that when learning English is linked to that motivation, it is going to mean the possibility of adult being engaged, like try to participate, advancing, having his or her persistence, and especially frustration management. When we talk about adult learner and when we consider motivation, it is necessary to mention Malcolm Knowles and his theory. It is called adult learning theory, where he poses the importance of motivation. And in adult is specifically based on internal like interest. Based on those interests and goals, adults learn. He considers that this to be different from children whose motivation is often driven by external factors like teachers, parents, and schools. And here we can have like a first step to understand the age we are going to work with. Next slide, please, Professor Claudia. Thank you. Another important aspect we want to bear in mind is experience, okay? Specifically, the integration to life experience. The importance of integration to life in adult learning lies on several factors, such as the relevance. It is to say, how meaningful is that in their everyday life? Understanding, which at the same time implies comprehension and, of course, learning. Also, background or the possibility of contrasting what they already know with what emerges as a new knowledge. Also, that integration fosters critical thinking due to it, the possibility of reflecting on what they have lived and they live now. And once again, when we talk about adult learners and experience, I think that it is necessary to mention David Cobb, who posed his experiential learning theory. where he emphasizes the critical role of experience in adult learning, positing that adults learn best through active engagement with their experiences. He believes that experiential learning is particularly relevant for adults because they bring a wealth of prior experiences that inform their learning processes. Then here, as you can see, we have a couple of very important concepts. They are the motivation and the experience as something we have as an opportunity for adults. However, we consider it is not enough because of the frustration or stress the adults have when learning English, especially if it is linked to syntax or grammar. So we consider another element to help them to overcome those issues. I'm talking about the cognitive load management. Okay, so please, Professor Claudia, next slide. Okay, so to talk about cognitive load management, I think that it is important to define the concept itself. We can say that it is the process of reducing the amount of activity in the working memory to increase cognitive efficiency and maximize storage and processing of information. This concept has been worked by John Sweller, and it was especially developed in 1988. And it can help when people struggle to store and process new information in their memory. Remember that this is taking into account the concepts of frustration and stress adults normally present or have in the classroom. And I would like to highlight the importance of cognitive load management in adults. And I think that there are 4 factors that are part of this importance which represent the importance of that. First of all, it allows the adults to focus on essential information, so it avoids they feel overwhelmed. Second, adults are more likely to retain information, and of course, it happens if cognitive load is balanced. Third, it helps learners develop stronger problem-solving skills since they can think critically and apply knowledge more effectively. And finally, and in my opinion, the most important at all is that it represents an important stress reduction there. And so these elements contribute to adult learner process. Next slide, please, Professor Claudia. We're talking about the contextual learning, like the scenario we are going to have. This research is intended to be conducted at 2 universities in Brazil and Colombia, Universidad Católica Luis Amigó, and this institution, that is Universidad Estadual Vale do Acaraú. Excuse my Portuguese. And well, we are going to have several students whose linguistic level is B1 and whose learning conditions are similar.
Thank you very much, Professor Juan Camilo. And now I will continue telling you a little bit about what are syntactic chunks and why did we select them as the target of our research. So throughout history, children were initially considered as tiny adults. Psychology fortunately evolved and showed the particular learning patterns, interaction patterns, socializing patterns that children have, which are different to the ones that adults have. And this historical process allowed us to characterize and to center education in the specific needs of children and teenagers. However, we are now considering, or we are committing the same mistake, having the same mistake with adults. And we are assuming that adults learn the same way that children do. We are focusing on adult EFL learning because it is a different process. because particularly when it comes to adults, there are lexical, there is lexical and syntactical knowledge development, which is at different stages, at very different stages between children and adults. Adults have a wider understanding and comprehension of their first language. They know the structure of the language. They know the functioning of the language, the pragmatic component of the language, the nuances and the insights that come with that first language, which is why we have now developed in this very globalized world several comprehensive models of language transfer. We now understand that most especially in adult learners, we have language transfer between the 2 or 3 or more languages that an adult knows. So let's have an example. Think about how you develop your first language. And how you acquire, because in first language, we mostly talk about acquisition. And think about how you learned English. Think about how you were able to comprehend the differences between both languages. And especially if you learned English as an adult, we have specific memories that we can collect and analyze in order to develop or to learn our second or third or more languages. But because we have that understanding of our first language, it's that we can apply that knowledge to our second language. There are 2 widely accepted language transfer models. The first is called the cross-language transfer by various authors that has been one of the most accepted models that considers the transfer of a specific linguistic rules by comparing and contrasting these rules, either syntactical rules, semantical rules, pragmatical rules, between 2 or more languages. However, this model fails to have a wider consideration of the context in which an adult is learning or in which a person is learning, because it's not applied only to adults. There is another more recent model developed by Juan and Anderson in their 2012 paper that talks about the structural sensitivity model. And this model allows us to explore not only the knowledge that a person or an adult has on their first language, but also the different settings in which he or she is developing a second or third or more languages. And addressing the transfer of knowledge between the 2 languages, not only from a linguistic point of view, but also from a socio-cultural perspective. And this is one of the key features of this particular research, because in this research, we will analyze how language transfers between Spanish to English learners and Portuguese to English learners. We will have the opportunity of proving the validity of the structural sensitivity theory by Juan and Anderson to see is it really just the linguistic aspects that are being transferred, or is it something else? So we base most of our teaching at times on grammatical rules. What will be the difference between grammatical rules and syntactic chunks? That in the second case, in syntactic chunks, we are not only referring to the rules of the language, but also to the comprehension of the semantical component in those words that we are using. because when we use a phrase like, I had to put off this project, we're not only understanding put off as a phrasal verb, we're also understanding the words and the interaction of the words put and off together, not only as a syntactic structure, but as a semantic structure to which we assign and apply meaning. This difference was addressed by the dual path model by Chang et al. 2012, in which we understand that when it comes to language, we cannot separate the syntactical component from the semantical component. It is absolutely impossible. It goes both ways. Words have meanings. When we put words together, it has sometimes very similar or the same meaning, but sometimes words, when they are interacting with each other in syntactical patterns, they modify or they change their meaning. So this is one of the key features that we're also going to analyze. The fact that we cannot separate syntactical knowledge from semantical knowledge, especially when it comes to adults, because of the patterns of language transfer that they are applying in their own learning knowledge, in their own learning processes. So Candice, Dr. Glenday will now address the methodological considerations. Candice?
Okay. Yes. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right. So, how are we going to conduct the experiment? How are we going to conduct this research? So, we are going to use a quantitative method, this side. Okay. And we are going to test Portuguese and Spanish learners of English, okay? And they are students from our 2 universities. And then we will have 3 phases, the pre-test, the intervention period, and the experimental phase. That would be the experiments themselves. And then we will need this statistical analysis of the findings from the experimental tests or tasks, okay? Please, Claudia, yeah. So what is our hypothesis? So we have 2. The primary hypothesis is that the reading time of students exposed to the intervention will be faster and more accurate, okay? So accurate means that they will not make so many mistakes. And the second hypothesis is that the intervention will improve the reading in general of these students. So they will read better, okay? So how are we going to do it? The research method, we have as participants the students from our 2 universities, and they will be divided into 2 groups, control group and experimental group. The control group will have 2, each from one or the other university, and the experimental groups will be the same. So what is a control group? A control group is to help us understand if the experimental group findings are significant or are they statistically significant. So when we have a control group, that helps us to establish if what we're finding is actually a finding and not just by chance, okay? So we really need to have the control group for that. And how are we going to conduct the experiments? Well, there are, as I said, 3 stages. The first stage will be assessing the level of English. Okay, so we have two vocabulary tests and a synthetic test. So that will put us, because as Juan said and Marcela, we are looking at B1 level. So we can't have students that are above B1 or below. Okay, so these tests will give us that criteria. Okay, and then there will be a 2-month intervention with the students. Okay, so as I said, we're going to have two groups, control group and experimental group. So the control group will not go through the intervention. Okay, just the experimental group. So that's where the difference comes from. So if we're going to find an effect from those who really did the intervention in comparison to those who did not. And then finally, the last stage is actually the experimental phase itself. We have two psycholinguistic tasks. Okay, we have the maze task and the self-reading task. Okay, self-paced reading task. Right, so the experimental design, it's kind of complicated. There are a lot of factors. So it's 2 by 2 by 2 by 2. That's a lot. But we have verbs with or without separation of prepositional particle. So we're talking about phrasal verbs, right? So the prepositional particle, some can be separated, others cannot. So we have, as the sentences will have local particle and non-local particle. That is the division of the sentences. And we have short and long sentences, and we have an experimental group and a control group. Okay, so what does the experiment look like? This is the maze task. Imagine that you're looking at a computer screen. Okay, so the participant will have starting a sentence with like Mary, and then he will have the second page or the second screen that will have two options, and you have to choose. Okay, and it moves on until the end of the sentence with always with two words to choose from. Okay, so that's the maze task. It's like a choice. You read and choose the words. And the next one is the self-reading task, self-paced reading task. That is, you actually just read. You do not need to do anything. You read the sentence, and we will measure the time that you're taking to read it. And after, there's like a very simple question, like, it was, for example, Joe threw out the documents. Did Joe throw out the documents? So basically very simple, just to check if the participant is actually actively reading, because he cannot be passively reading, which means he's not actually reading, he's just moving his eyes. Okay, so that's why we have the question. And so these are the phases of this project, and we have a year to do it, which sounds like a lot, but it's not. So we have to work a lot, and that's all from me, and I will let Professor Claudia finish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Candice. So our expected outcomes is to, well, not only to confirm the hypothesis on the effect of the intervention knowledge, transitive and intransitive phrasal verbs, as the ones that Dr. Glenday just showed us, but we also hope to check patterns of cross-language transfer between Portuguese English and Spanish English, and also to analyze which of the models that I told you before, do they adjust most? Do they adjust to the traditional cross-language transfer that considers only the linguistic patterns that are being transferred between languages? Or do we need something more? Do we need to consider culture. And given that our Spanish, Colombian Spanish, and Brazilian Portuguese cultures are also different, we will have the opportunity of checking if we need more, if we need sociocultural power to explain, which will be most likely to support structural sensitivity theory. Additionally, we expect to have methodological considerations for the adult EFL teaching and learning, because as I previously mentioned, adults do not learn a foreign language or a second language the same way that children do. So we need to create awareness in our teaching communities that we need alternatives, we need differentiated pedagogical and didactical practices to teach EFL to adults. Because regardless of their previous experiences with English, once you enter a formal learning process in another language, the experience is different. Because in all of our cases, and this is something this research team has discussed, we have previous experiences with children learning in which we learned a bit of English as children, but then we learned formally as adults, and the experience was completely different. So we cannot continue expecting that our pedagogical practices are going to be exactly the same when teaching children than with or teenagers than with teaching adults. As conclusions, Professor Juan Camilo will begin with the conclusions of this presentation.
Yes, thank you, Professor Claudia. As we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, this research is just beginning, so therefore our conclusions are fundamentally questions. First of all, we would like to know the differences between students from both countries in the exercise of implementing the research. As Professor Marcela said, maybe cultural aspects could influence or determine some processes, and that's something that we want to figure out. Similarly, we would like to find out if adult learning differs significantly from that of children or adolescents based on what we can observe in the interventions we have.
Additionally, we also have questions, as I told you before, regarding the transfer of languages, because it's not only what is being transferred, but also how much is being transferred. Do we have linguistic patterns, either in Spanish or Portuguese, that allow us to learn a language more effectively? Do we have more similarities between either Portuguese or Spanish that allow us to comprehend or to grasp this intervention a little bit more effectively? We also expect to find an effect on learning, on general learning, because this project is just the beginning of hopefully what will be a long-term collaboration between our universities, because we also need to understand how much is this going to affect or to have an effect on learning in general after the intervention. So this is something that we are now considering for extending our research beyond this project and going a little bit further when it comes to potentially explaining the patterns of cross-language transfer and the effects of interventions such as this in adult EFL learning. Well, right now, that is the end of our presentation. So we wonder if you have any questions or any comments to offer us.
Professor Camilo and Professor Marcela? Yes.
Excuse me. Yes. Okay. So good afternoon. I would like to say thank you for the presentation. It was very good. I think the project is very interesting. Do you believe it is possible for us to envision a future where the idea of having emotions and cognition go into the process of learning, especially on schools in general, like on high schools or even with children, toddlers, or anything like that? Do you think that's something that's going to be possible in the future? Or is it something that's very far away? Because I know it's not directly related, the question, to the overall aim of the study, but at the same time, it's very interesting to think about these possibilities.
It is indeed, and this is not only something that we may have in the future. This is something that is happening now. We have now research that shows the incredibly relevant that emotions and emotional management have on any type of learning. And now the research is opening up specifically to language learning, into second and foreign language development. So, and I think this is not only a construct that we need to consider for children and adolescents, this is also a consideration we need to have for adults. Because as Professor Juan Camilo pointed out, the adult also needs encouragement. He or she also need motivation and also need to engage. And in order to engage, in order for any person, regardless of their age, need to engage in a learning process, is to bring all of they are. And a person is not only cognition, a person is not only a working brain and certain mental functions, a person is also emotions and experience. So we need to bring this into the classroom. And even though, well, research on this is just opening up, particularly in the field of EFL and ESL, we need to bring it to our research practices as soon as possible. Thank you for that question. Very highly interesting question.
He tends to write his final paper on something in that direction. So maybe we could talk together, and you could be a co-advisor, maybe. Yeah. So that would be lovely.
Absolutely. It's not my strongest point, but I do have, so I have read some very interesting research that maybe I can share with you.
That's lovely. Yeah. So, any more questions? Okay.
My question is regarding the Spanish language. I think that Professor Juan Camilo mentioned something about that. Is about how the speakers of other Latin America countries speak the Spanish too, and if this the how do I say that the difference between the countries and the Spanish interfere in some way in this research.
Regarding Colombian and other countries? In other countries, okay.
Well, I think that here, for example, in Colombia, we have different kinds of ways to use the Spanish. I mean, like the regions live and use the accent, the language, the pronunciation, all these matters in a different way. So sometimes it's difficult to get what a different person says when that person comes from a different culture. And I think that it is going to happen same with other countries. So of course it's a factor that we should pay attention to. And I think that, for example, you and I don't speak Portuguese, but I suppose that Portuguese there in Brazil any kind of difference with the ones that is taught in Portugal. So it's like a factor that could influence or affects in a way what we want to figure out, but is an element that I think it's interesting to consider. Like even if you want to go beyond it, we want to look for more information, and if we want to do other kind of studies and to learn more. But of course, the way we speak Spanish is absolutely different to the ones that people, for example, Venezuela do, or other countries, even when they are close to us.
Any other questions online? Do we have any questions? Okay, we do have one. Let me see. I need to come close. Okay, Felipe Orlando. How do you provide constructive feedback to adult learners, and how does this feedback influence their learning process?
Well, I would like to address that question because we have actually my graduation paper students here at Luis Amigó University. They are conducting research on formative assessment and the role of that feedback has on adult learners, especially. And I believe, or what they have found already, is that constructive feedback or any other form of formative assessment is an integral part of the learning process for adults. And why? Because as I said before, and I would like to connect this to the question regarding emotions, adults also need encouragement. Adults also need to be told that they are doing well. Because not only because we are building their confidence, an adult has his or her confidence level in himself or herself very well established when they are like fully grown. However, it doesn't mean that they are not going to use that feedback in order to enhance their learning experience. So it has a fundamental role in any type of research, which is why one of the features that this particular research has in the intervention is the use of feedback from the software, well, particularly from the software that we are using. But even if it is just a small type of automated feedback, adults integrate it into their learning process. So imagine how significant it will be when that feedback doesn't come from a computer, but it comes from another human being. Thank you, Felipe Orlando, for your question as well.
Online, no? Okay. I would like to also mention that we do have a call for Spanish classes. And do you know who is our partner? They are. Yes. So Professor Juan and Professor Marcela, they are working with me, and their students are going to teach you Spanish, and you are going to teach them Portuguese. Yeah.
And
So,
I will be one of your students.
oh, lovely. Great. Okay. So we have that. I just wanted to take a moment to say this because I'm going to say it in Portuguese because they'll understand better. O edital já foi lançado para as inscrições, certo? Então, atento ao prazo para não perderem, certo? Tanto para facilitadores quanto para a inscrição para o curso, né? Então, vocês podem dar aula de português, de inglês, né? Português sendo para a Universidade Luiz Amigó, e como alunos, vocês podem ser alunos de espanhol ou de inglês. Okay? So, I really needed to say that because it's nice when our students here can see you, and we thank you very much for this cooperation, and I'm sure it's going to be a long cooperation, and I expect that maybe in the future our students will be motivated to visit you and attend some classes in Medellín. So that would be lovely.
Thank you. Thank you, Candice, for this opportunity. Thank you for listening to us. Thank you for your questions because they help us enrich our knowledge, our understanding of language processes, and because they also show us what you are interested in and the ways in which we can collaborate in the future. Anytime they want to come to here to Universidad Católica de Amigó, you are more than welcome.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your invitation. And I would like to say something in Spanish. So, like, we are going to be ready to this. Muchas gracias por su invitación. Nosotros también queremos aprender portugués y también, ¿por qué no visitarlos y conocer su bellísimo país? Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado. And excuse my Portuguese.
No, I think in Spanish, the way that you speak Spanish, it is really clear. I have heard Spanish from Spain, and honestly, that's like no way that you can understand anything. And I think the Spanish from Colombia is very nice to hear. It's easy to comprehend. It's not at all as in Spain, which is like very complicated. So that's lovely.
It's also difficult for us to comprehend Spanish from Spain.
Wow,
At times.
that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. It's almost another language. It's the same for us when we hear Portuguese from Portugal. It's very different. Yeah.
True.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. They are working a lot today, so they have lots of work to do. I really appreciate you being with us, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Candice.
Thank you.
You.
Bye. Ok, então vamos iniciar a próxima apresentação em 5 minutos, então dá tempo de tomar uma água, certo? E aí a gente já reinicia com a próxima apresentação. Ok? Bom, a segunda apresentação do nosso dia é Lexical and Synthetic English Knowledge of High School Students from SOBRAL. A pesquisa realizada por Felipe Chaves, Ana Lara Souza, Ana Maria Costa. Ok? Então, com vocês.
So thank you so much, Professor Dr. Candice. So good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for joining us for our presentation on the lexical and syntactic knowledge in English of high school students in Sobral. I'm Ana Maria, and I'm here with my colleagues Ana Lara Parente and Felipe Chaves. And allow me to introduce our supervisor, Dr. Candice Glenday. One second. Okay. Now we can start. Okay. Let's restart. Okay. So again, good afternoon, everyone. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for our presentation on the lexical and synthetic knowledge of high school students of Sobral. As I said before, I am Ana Maria, and I'm here with my colleagues Felipe Chaves and Ana Lara Parente. And I will introduce our supervisor, Professor Dr. Candice, who guide us through this research. And together, we have explored the English language proficiency of high school students from Sobral. We focus on the vocabulary and the syntax. So today, we will walk through the main goals of our research, our methods, our findings and results, and what they might mean for the English education in similar contexts. So we appreciate your attention and we hope you find our insights useful. So let's get started. So to begin with, I think it's important to us understand why we focus on the lexical and the synthetic knowledge in relation to reading comprehension. In Brazil, high school students, they are expected to develop the reading comprehension in a second language. So it's important not only for our famous national exam ENEM, everybody knows here, but also for the success in higher education, like here at university. So our study seeks to investigate how both lexical and syntactic knowledge impact a student's reading comprehension in English as a second language. So our objective here is clear to analyze the lexical and syntactic knowledge of high school students in state schools in Sobral, Ceará, and examine how these skills might affect the reading comprehension in English as a second language. It's important to highlight too that to conduct our study, we use a similar methodology used in the research of Suzoy and Tanier, the role of vocabulary versus synthetic knowledge and L2 reading comprehension. Now that we have outlined our objectives, Let's move to the core question in our research. We know that lexical and syntactic knowledge is essential for reading comprehension. But we want to understand which of these factors has the greater impact. So our research question is, what is the most influential factor in reading comprehension? Syntax, vocabulary depth, or vocabulary breadth? And what change can we make based on this? So since we have clarified our research question, it's important to explore a little bit about the main components of reading comprehension and why reading comprehension is important. Okay? So, reading comprehension. What is reading comprehension? It's the ability of understand, interpret, and infer information for a written text. Okay? For students, particularly in Brazil, reading comprehension in a second language is really important for the academic success and also for the exam that I mentioned before, any. So, improving comprehension isn't only working on vocabulary, knowing vocabulary, but it involves also understanding how words and the structures work in a sentence. So, building on that, I will talk about lexical knowledge. Lexical knowledge or vocabulary knowledge, okay, it's fundamental in learning a second language. Knowing words involve more than just recognizing it. It includes understand words' meanings, its limitations, and how it behaves in sentences. So when students expand their vocabularies, they can better predict and interpret text, which strengthens the reading comprehension. So lexical knowledge even serves as a foundation for syntactic understanding, which we will discuss next. So we talked about reading comprehension and its importance, lexical knowledge, and what is syntactic knowledge, Anna? So syntactic knowledge refers to understanding how words function and interact in a sentences, including knowledge of the grammatical rules and word order. Okay? For instance, when we think about a sentence like Anna loves, Anna loves, we expect a noun or object. The mental lexical not only provide us word meanings, but also inform us of a word's category, guiding us in constructing grammatically correct, better sentence. Syntax allow us, the students, to decode complex sentence and better comprehend text. So, in summary, our study looked at the levels of syntactic and lexical knowledge among high school students, as I mentioned before. And through various assessments, we examined how vocabulary depth and breadth and syntactic knowledge contribute to interpreting text, especially in the context of the NA exam. So with that, I will introduce some of the instruments we use to measure these competencies, and then I will pass it over to Lara, who will guide us through the remaining two instruments, the methodology and the statistical tests. And later on, Felipe will explain to us the results and will lead us into the discussion. So, to measure these competencies, it's important to highlight that we use four distinct texts. Yeah. So the first one is the syntactic knowledge test. So first we assess the syntactic knowledge from the students using items adapted from the TOEFL test. So in this test include 45 grammar-related questions, with 20 of them related to correct word order. Okay, syntactic order. Sorry. in a multiple choice format. So the maximum score is 45. And here you can see one of the examples used in the test. So our next test is the reading comprehension test. Thank you. So the reading comprehension test, it's really familiar to a lot of us. To measure the reading comprehension of the students, we use 4 tests previously used in NA exams. So this test assess the student's ability to interpret, to identify the facts and the inferred information. Okay, which are success. They are essential for the success on the exam. For each test, there were multiple choice items, as you can see, and totally 13 items with a maximum score of 130 points. With that, I will pass it over to Lara, who will explain the remaining 2 instruments we used in our test, the AAT test and the VST test. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So I'm Lada. I'm going to proceed and explain to you about the 2 remaining instruments. So as for our next instrument, we have the AAT, which stands for Word Associates Test. So this test was conducted on the second day of evaluation at the schools, as well as VST. And it is composed by 40 items. The maximum score of each item is 4, and we have the maximum score for the test as a number of 160. This example of question gives us a base to the main objectives of this test. And this test, the WAT test, aims to measure the depth, no, I'm really sorry, aims to measure the breadth of vocabulary of students. So we can see that we have an adjective on the first line, and then we have a list of words. And on these 2 boxes, we have different kinds of words. So on the box that's on the left, we have words that could be defined as synonyms to the adjective above. And then we have on the right side words that could be combined with the adjective. For example, we have here on the insert key that we can see that quick and surprising could be seen as synonyms to sudden. And then we have that change and noise could be viewed as words that can come after sudden. So sudden change, sudden noise. Is that clear? Okay, so I will pass on to the WAT, VST, I'm sorry. So on the vocabulary size test, we aim to analyze the depth of vocabulary. Then we have a test that's composed by 100 items and a maximum score of actually 20,000. It was just a typo here. Okay, our professor is actually giving me a correction that we have a maximum score of 100, but then, okay, 100 points. And after that, these points are going to be multiplied by 200. That's right, because we have this multiply because that's the maximum of words. And then we have 100 that we're gonna multiply by this number of 200. And then we can assess the number of word families that students know. And we have this example on the right of 2 versions of the same test, right? So we have in version A, a question that says, C, they saw it. Then we have 4 alternatives. And then the first says, closed it tightly. B says, waited for it. C says, looked at it. And D says, started it up. And then you just mark the right one. And each correct answer is going to be multiplied. And then you have the final result. And I'm sorry for my error. Okay, as for I'm sorry. As for the participants, we have conducted this research at 2 high schools in SOBRAL, and 259 students took part in the research. As of those, 101 were excluded after first analysis due to non-attendance on the second day of tests. Okay, I wasn't appearing on camera, apparently. And then after second analysis, another 64 students were excluded because of invalid data. I'm sorry. As for the statistical tests that we have here, we have 4 tests that were used for our data analysis, and then we had the procedure to lead us to the results of this research, and I'm gonna pass to Felipe.
Okay, so good afternoon. Usually, it's very common to let's say skip over some analysis when you are talking about studying about some studies, right? Studying about some studies, yes. So I'm just going to be very brief because this subject of statistics, some people don't find it very interesting, right? It's not very appealing. However, it's important to understand that data for itself, just data, it's not indicative of much. What does this mean? Imagine that if we were to collect the results and try to have a subjective analysis of things, we wouldn't be playing fair because we wouldn't have any other instruments to help us analyze the data that we collected. So after collecting the data, analyzing it, we ended up with, if I remember correctly, about 94 students, 96. And after analysis, we run some tests, right? Those are the main ones. So Shapiro-Wilk test, it tests sample normality. That is, so normality. Oh, if the sample is normal. It's not that simple, right? But basically, if we don't have, just to see if we don't have like any weird numbers, any, as we can say, outliers, right? And actually, we did have not specifically outliers in the sense of the extreme examples, but we had some inconsistencies regarding the data, which is very normal, right? This doesn't mean that the tests or the data are invalid, just that we need to assess another thing, that's the normality of the data. And for that, we use the Friedman test. The Friedman test consists of this analysis of data, and the idea, the goal that we want to achieve is to discard the new hypothesis. That is, the new hypothesis, imagine that new is like something that we can't use in the analysis. Since we were able to discard the hypothesis of new, that means that we had valid data. And then we were able to continue with the analysis. The Durbin-Conover test, I'm sorry, was used to assess the significance of a variable. Oh, so if a variable is significant, basically yes, right? If we had, like, if everything was, let's say correct for a sense, okay? And because of that, we can then analyze and you can kind of gradually get to the conclusion of a variable being more significant than the other in this sense. Okay, I'm not explaining in detail because we don't have time. And finally, but last but not least, we have linear hierarchical regression test. Basically, okay, imagine that all the tests that we ran produced variables, and the main variable that we were analyzing was exactly the reading comprehension. Okay, as we assessed in the beginning, our objective, our goal was to assess the level of performance on reading comprehension and try to try to say which of the constructs that we analyzed was the most impactful on it. Okay, we have some examples of tables, right? This first table is of the Durbin-Conover test. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time on tables because they're boring and hard to understand, but here they are. Important to note the p-value here. It's valid for all the families here of comparisons. So between WT, VST, WT syntax, WT reading, whatever. The statistic values are those as you can see, and all the p-values are above 0.001. We also have a table for the linear hierarchical regression by the variable reading comprehension compared to the global model tests. That's a lot of information. Basically, everything is okay. That's the important part, right? That's the important part to get. However, what is most important here is that little p-value right there, okay? Under global model test. As you can see, the analysis when using as a model, when testing against the global model, found out the values 0.031 for WT, 0.037 for VST, and 0.087 for syntax. And what does this mean? You looking at the table, I don't know, who knows, right? However, when we move to the results, what we found is very interesting, especially because one of the things that we aim to do with this research was try to, how can I say, not reproduce in this simple sense, but we wanted to test against, I'm going to give you guys a little spoiler, right? The research of Susoi and Tenyer. Because these students, they conducted a similar study, and of course, we used their study as a base, okay? And after analysis, as we can see here with the numbers, we found out that syntax seems to have low influence on reading comprehension performance. Attention. Do not think that anybody can understand, for example, a full text of English without syntactic knowledge. Okay? That's not what this is saying. This is just saying that apparently the correlation between the performance of reading comprehension and the syntactic knowledge seems to not be very correlated, very close to each other. But of course, someone who is very proficient in English will have a high score on syntactic knowledge, of course. Vocabulary breadth. So breadth and depth. Imagine that breadth being horizontal, depth being vertical. Okay? Breadth, while higher than syntax, okay, in its influence, shows timid. It's not that it's not relevant, but it's very, there's not a lot of relevance there. However, and that's very interesting, based on our results, vocabulary depth, which was measured with the WAT test, just WAT, suggests a higher influence on its relation to reading comprehension performance. That is, translating, apparently, students who scored higher on the WAT seem to be able to score higher on the reading comprehension test too. So, what can we conclude about this, right? First, I'm sorry for the wall of texts, okay? I didn't know how to summarize this, but basically, the results found within our statistics analysis seem to indicate that syntax, while being of the most importance to language performance. So, again, of course, we're not trying to say that syntactic knowledge is not important to language, okay? We're trying just to demonstrate that this variable, syntax in the sense of this variable, it's not highly associated with reading comprehension. What seems to be most associated with reading comprehension is vocabulary depth. This is very interesting because, as I said, Susoy and Tainer, they conducted a similar research in Turkey with students of university. And we conducted a similar study, okay? So this study was inspired and built upon their study. That does not mean that we copied the study, please. That just means that we found something that was very similar, even if the sample was totally different. I don't think the sample can get any more different than that. From university students in Turkey to high school students in SOBRAL. And they're actually online with their results, which is very interesting because it's somewhat expected, but it's still surprising. So what can we conclude about that, right? So if vocabulary depth is, let's say, more important or seems to be more important, a focus on lexical skills, especially aiming at the test of NA, seem to be more important than an extensive study of grammar rules. Because so as we could see, if the students know the order of the word, if the students know the word that go here, it goes here. If he has a depth, if he knows an association of words, it seems more likely that he's able to perform better on tasks that involve reading comprehension. And one of the most famous tasks that involve reading comprehension is NA. Okay? We would like to say thank you. And we'd like to say thank you for our teacher, our professor, Professor Dr. Ellen Glenday, Candice Ellen Glenday. We'd like to say thank you for SYNTACTIC Letras for the opportunity. And I would personally like to thank my colleagues here. It would not be possible without you. You have any questions? Okay.
My question is, did the schools had any project specific to English language? And if no, did this interfere in the choose of the schools, and if it would be interesting to conduct a research comparing schools that have a project specific to English language and those who not.
Okay. Do you want to answer, or should I answer? Okay. So first things first, I will not be disclaiming any names. Okay. We had some problematic results. Let's say that. Let's just say it that way. But no, I would not say that these schools had any specific training program for English. We know that in SOBRAL, we have some examples of schools who have a more specialized project, like English project in general. And we could probably expect a higher level of, how can I say, points. But the thing is, the idea of the research is not to get like a higher point like score. The idea here is between scores, that's a possibility, of course. Like maybe if the students have a certain level of proficiency, maybe we could see some different results. But the idea here is not to have a sample that has more quality in the sense of high scores, but more on the analysis. Like even in the sample that we had, like the scores were, pardon my French, they were horrible, and they were very concerning in the sense of learning, of the English learning in schools. However, they were still online with the research, with the results of Suescún tenure, and they were using students at universities. So it's not a matter of quality of scores as much as it's a merit of conducting the analysis of the variables. If we find the variable, because of course, even with this result, it's also important to understand that this is just notion. This is just a suggestion. We still need like at least, I don't know, hundreds of studies in this specific project to say like with more security, like, oh, so this is one of them. Okay. Any other question?
So, good afternoon, everybody. I have a question about focus on form in this research. Like, if students have a focus on form, will be easier to them resolve the test, or be difficult to another students and then the class? Like focus on form when I talking about is like be into a base of structure and have what I'm it's about focus on form, like in grammatical and in grammar and vocabulary. It will be easier to them to resolve the test and be easier to another students to be in the level level high or not. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm talking.
Yeah, sure. The short answer is I don't know. The long answer is it depends. Because like imagine that even if we have a scenario that a school has a lot of I don't know, antiquated methodology, or wants to use the audiolingual method in every classroom that they can. They really want to focus on the form, you said? Yes. So basically grammar structure, grammar drills, grammar. If we compare this to, let's say, another school that doesn't focus on anything, yes, probably they will have a high score. Would this be relevant to the sense of the variables being analyzed to each other? I don't know. Maybe. Because it's a little weird, it's a little hard to answer, because this in itself, the focus on form can be a variable. It's something that depends on students to students, from school to school, and etc. You know? So maybe, like we will have to conduct another one to test that. Okay? Any more questions? Online, do you have questions online? No? Yes, because as Dr. Candice said, yes, the idea is more to analyze that if the models of schools that we have in Brazil are adequate to prepare our students to ENEM, right? And how can I say that? They're not. And like, I don't know what I could say to you, like, what should they do? we concluded that apparently, if you had a higher focus on lexical knowledge in general, or I don't know, in these older forms of language, in the sense of lexical language, not lexical language, the lexicon of the language, it seems to be more important than extensive grammar rules or focus on form. You can say that, in a sense. That's the conclusion that we get. But of course, to measure this, like specific variables, for example, schools that focus specifically on the teaching of English to students, or we have some private schools here that have they call it a bilingual program, but it's not exactly a bilingual program, not a bilingual school. You see, when we stop to think about all the variables, it becomes very hard and very difficult. Yes. Just the grammar rules, especially like ostensive grammar rules, aka drills. Don't do drills. We hate drills.
Your personal opinion on the results of the research, and like, do you think that based on these results, the change would be better if it was in the way that the schools teaches the students English, or the way the NN show this type of questions of reading comprehension, or that this could be changed in some way?
Okay. I would say, so in my personal opinion, that's going to be modified by my bias, just to be clear. Probably I think the way that schools treat the knowledge, the content, the subjects, and mainly the focus of learning related to English. Probably how prepared the teachers are at schools is also very important to a change. But mainly, I believe that a change on a name, it's like trying to solve one thing, trying to change the result to modify the sample. It doesn't, like, for me, okay, so now, for my personal opinion, as the question said, I would say that changing a name with no regards to education is not going to solve anything. Because as you could see, I think on the, excuse me. So, 259 third-year students participated on the tests, of this research. 101 were excluded due to non-attendance, and after final analysis, 64 were excluded due to invalid data. And this invalid data is not like, very low scores or very, very weird answers. This can happen. Yes, it happens. But they would do like weird things, like drawings, names, and things that they should not be writing there. So I believe that first we have two big issues, right? Two great issues. We have one, the formation of teachers and their capabilities of teaching, their understanding of methodology, and the cultural and social aspects of students on schools. When those two can work together and those two can be changed together, yes, I think that would be the main point of change for schools. Probably won't happen, but we can only hope.
So, talking a little bit about my opinion of what I understood from your question, I think both of them are connected. We passed through the high school and we know how it works, the English teaching at school, because we were once students. And we know that when we study in English, especially on high school, our English classes are focused on how to solve inane questions, how to interpret inane questions. So I think both of them are connected, and it's really hard to only change one of them because both are connected. Our methods of teaching are really related to how the inane is showed to us as a student. So both of them are connected, in my opinion, and it's really hard to only focus on one of these points. And I hope I answered your question.
Anything else? Oh,
In an end, the questions is just reading comprehension, right? And if you could change something related to English in an end, like the questions, what you could change? What you want to change? Like add writing or listening?
Well, it's a really hard question to answer because let me stand up. It's a really hard question to answer because I would think in two different ways. The English test the same day of the test, like with all the other subjects, and the test only the English test. It's really hard because if you stop to thinking, there are 1,000 students. There are a lot of things, a lot of tasks to correct, and we know that is the our lovely redação. So, as a professor and as a student, maybe I would use shorter texts, or I would focus on grammar too, because I remember when I was a student, one of the things that really bothered me as a student is that it was that the school wouldn't teach us grammar, would only focus on reading comprehension. And as we said here, both are important, right, for reading comprehension. So I would probably focus on grammar questions as well. And I don't know, I feel bad for the students. So I will not say writing text to them. But if it was only an English test that I think would be really good, probably I would think about a test that would assess all the abilities, the listening skills, the reading skills, writing skills, grammar, and also the speaking skills. And I think if there was a test like that in our educational system, our English proficiency would be way better, and that would be really, really good to as a student. But thank you so much for your question, Victoria.
It's not really a question, but some kind of discussion. Felipe talked about the quality of the teachers that graduate and go to teach in high schools. And we talking about the format of the NA. And if we think that the way that the teaching is structured in high schools are just for the students do the NA, and in if it's just for this and the results of NN are pretty bad some in regarding the English, we can say that maybe the problem is in the middle of the road, like the teachers. If the we just stood in DNA the tasks of reading comprehension, and we can, you said, like we all stood here in high schools are the pretty the all the way grammar, and like how this is affecting each other, like how do we study grammar and the ENN tasks are reading comprehension, and the results of the people like ends the high schools, they graduate from high school in a basically not knowing anything of English. And I think that Felipe talk about a great point in we think that maybe we should focus more in the teaching.
So thank you so much for your comment, João. As a teacher, I think that there is also a great point, but I also think that as a teachers, us as a teachers at high schools, we are really limited by the system. So even though nowadays we have more teachers worried about the formation, worried about to study and improve more, there is also this big problem that it's related to the system, and we need to do what they ask us to do too. We talked to, it's one of the points of our research too, about TNA, how evaluate the students. But thank you so much for your comment. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Eileen.
So for you guys as a teacher, do you think the personal life of students will interfere their result, or they are neglect about English comprehension and uh, in this test? And then like you said, the both of methodology and the teaching are both connected. So the personal life are connected too, also connected with these results. They yeah, they result in this test. Do you think?
So thanks, Ellen, for your question. Yes, our emotional state, of course, that will affect our results in one of tests, especially in A, that it's a really overwhelming episode of our life. It's really stressful as we all pass through that experience. It's really stressful, and there is one point that we cannot even read in Portuguese. So yes, of course, that our emotional state will affect the results. And I don't know if you it only related to an A or about learning English.
Learning English, because I think, for my personal opinion, the personal life will are very present or comprehensive and learning process. So I learning my vocabulary like just in home by myself, and when I enter in high school, I improve my English and in college too. But I think our personal life interfere too, and allow a lot of this exam we do, and in presentations like that. So yeah, I it's not in just in NM, but in how subjects and how parts of our life, I think.
Yeah, related to the English learning, the English journey learning, in overall. Yes, and I say this from the student point of view, but also as the teacher's point of view. I see a lot of my students that they are really skillful. They had the abilities, but the fact that they are under pressure will affect their results. So I do believe, and I think Felipe would be really good to talk about this. How emotions?
Um, God bless. So yeah, so yes, of course, there is a little construct that we call affective filter, right? And we also have another terminology for work memory, right? Those two constructs can be very important to understand the idea of pressure, emotion on learning in general or cognitive capabilities. If you are under stress, for example, if you are working memory, like the memory of, it's not a short-term memory, it's even shorter, like it's a memory, for example, is like trying to process actions or things like that. And it's funny because stress, it takes a part of your working memory. So for example, if you are stressed, your working memory is busy with stress. So it's not only from the point of view of motivation, it's also from a point of view of cognitive load. Your cognitive load can be affected by emotion, not like not can be affected, it will be affected. If you are stressed, it's harder to concentrate because of that. We all had that day that we had a lot of things going on our mind, and we couldn't concentrate. We couldn't think of anything else because we were overwhelmed. Our work memory was overwhelmed, and also our affective filter was kind of high. So the effect, imagine that the affective filter as a barrier, that if you have a lot of strong emotions regarding an action, let's say, for example, if you get really anxious when you clean the house, probably your house will be kind of dirty. For example, I'm just using a crude example, right? Of course. It's also another way that our emotions can affect our learning. Okay, so yes, everything is very, very interconnected. Okay, your is answered. Okay.
Okay. I wish to have this opportunity to participate in this discussion. Um, I will go back to Victoria's question because I think it's very relevant, just as well as other questions too, but more specifically about a name that's on this Sunday. Yeah, on the 3rd of November. I think it's the 3rd of November. Okay. And about the model of questions, there are some aspects that I would definitely change, but we don't have much space to work and only 5 questions, right? Because we have 5 English questions and 5 Spanish questions, right? And the other 40 are linguistic questions, right? And Portuguese based questions, Portuguese comprehension, reading comprehension. And I think the first thing to do would give English and Spanish, foreign languages, more space. So we could work with much more contents and we could work with much more areas and competences. And I think that, of course, we can't have all the 4 competences on the test because, listening obviously wouldn't be contemplated. But I think that we could definitely give more importance to grammar, as well as Anna said. And reading comprehension was the main objective and was the variable, of course, of our research. And I think it remains the main object of any test, but I would also give, with more questions, I would give importance to other competences. And I think that's one of the greatest things of language. It's that we have 4 competences, and then they should all be given its importance. And I would also like to talk about what Erling said, because I think that emotion and personal life, they of course play a major role in the learning process. And as for my teacher's point of view, yeah, that I want to share with you too, um, I had many students of all ages. You know, I've been teaching since I was 17. I still look 17 or less. But when I was working with children, they had a lot of things going on. Of course, we have too, and we have adult problems, but you know, their child's minds, they work in a way that can let's see, can be a problem when we're talking about learning something that we can't always do comparisons. We can't always give the best explanations to make them with their child's minds, to give them the best understanding. I'm sorry, I was away from the microphone. And I think that when we're talking about development, I think that has everything to do with mental processing of second language. And when we are children, of course, we have this mental processing that's very different from adults' mental processing. And then we had to choose the correct approach to deal with children. And I think that's, you know, it 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 doesn't have to do with age, actually, because I don't know if you have seen this movie, Uptown Girls. I love this movie, but it's like the movie of a grown up that looks like a child and a child that looks like a grown up. So it doesn't have to do with age. It's about mental development, about personality, about many factors. And then we have second language acquisition. And second language, it has to be a different approach for children, like more specifically, because of their way to perceive knowledge. Yeah, so as Felipe said, it has this cognitive, how do you say this? This cognitive, oh my God, you're gonna say it.
Cognitive load.
So there's this main factor. Sorry. And that's okay. Is that okay?
So now I will pass the microphone to our Professor Candice.
Thank you very much. That was a lovely presentation. Thank you for the questions. And we'll be back in 5 minutes with a very special guest. He is the responsible for the internationalization sector at the university. So it will be nice to talk to him, and he'll give you some ideas about why is it important to participate in exchange programs. Okay, so 5 minutes. Hi, Santiago. How are you? Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Candice. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you
It's
so much
fine.
for your invitation.
Okay, so I'll just present you and then you can feel free.
Perfect.
Bom, agora a nossa apresentação é com o chefe de Relações Internacionais da Universidade Católica Luiz Amigó, Santiago Hernández Trejos, e ele vai falar sobre a experiência global, porque estudar no exterior pode mudar tudo. Okay, so this is going to be like a trilingual conversation, but you can feel free and present in Spanish. And
Thank you so much.
my students probably will ask you in Portuguese or in English.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you very much for being here.
Okay, thank you. Hola, buenas tardes para todos y para todas. Bueno, gracias a Candice por la invitación. Gracias a ustedes por estar presentes, por querer escuchar un poco sobre este tema que les quiero compartir el día de hoy. Tengo una presentación aquí para ustedes. Por favor, me confirman si pueden ver la presentación. Can you see my presentation? Okay. And can you hear me? Could you please confirm? Okay. ¿Me confirman si me están escuchando? Ok, me confirman si ahora sí me pueden. Can you confirm, please, if you can hear me or see me? I can see you all. Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Thank you so much for confirming. Sorry, this is my first time using this tool, but now I'm gonna switch into Spanish. Buenas tardes nuevamente para todos y para todas. Como me presentó Candice, yo soy Santiago Hernández Trejos, soy el jefe de Relaciones Internacionales de la Universidad Católica Luis Amigó en Medellín, Colombia. Y bueno, estoy muy contento, muy feliz de haber recibido esta invitación a participar en esta semana de letras que ustedes organizan allí. Tengo mi afinidad y mi corazón también en las letras, en la lingüística, mi profesión. Yo soy traductor inglés, francés, español y por eso muy complacido y muy feliz acepté esta invitación a hablarle no precisamente del área de letras o del área lingüística, pero sí de un área que, en la que he estado trabajando por más de 10 años, que es en la internacionalización de la educación superior. Y precisamente hoy el tema que quiero compartir con ustedes como jefe de relaciones internacionales a los estudiantes de la UBA es precisamente cómo a través de las experiencias internacionales, de las experiencias globales, todo nos cambia. Aquí quiero traerles diferentes beneficios y ojalá puedan quedarse hasta el final, porque sí quiero hablarles de algo muy particular que ofrece mi país, que ofrece Colombia, en el que los ciudadanos extranjeros, en este caso ustedes, pueden aspirar a tener becas para su formación de posgrado en programas cortos de un año, que en Colombia denominamos especializaciones, en programas de maestría o en programas de doctorado. Son becas muy buenas, pero bueno, no me quiero adelantar al tema y quiero que comencemos hablando un poco de vivir la experiencia global, de estudiar en el extranjero y cómo esto cambia la percepción de todos y de todas. Aquí con esta introducción queremos mencionarles algo y es que hay un viajero muy conocido que es Ibn Battuta y él habla de que viajar te deja sin palabras y después te convierte en un narrador de historias. Es muy interesante cómo nosotros en las experiencias que manejamos de intercambio en el exterior y también a nivel nacional, cómo nuestros estudiantes, inclusive nuestros profesores también, porque algunos profesores, pues, por diferentes factores y motivos, no han vivido experiencias internacionales y cuando regresan no son los mismos que se fueron. Ese es el mensaje y esa es la invitación y con el ánimo que yo les quiero hablar el día de hoy en esto. ¿Cuáles son los beneficios de vivir una experiencia académica internacional? Vivir una experiencia académica internacional, sobre todo, no es lo mismo hacer turismo a vivir una experiencia académica internacional. En una experiencia académica internacional logramos entender y logramos explorar nuevas metodologías y enfoques de aprendizaje. Ustedes saben que los sistemas educativos de cada país son muy particulares, tienen sus fortalezas como también sus debilidades, pero eso nos permite entender también otras dinámicas globales que existen en nuestros campos de estudio. Y esto se ve en todos ellos. Esto le sucede a los de letras, esto le sucede a los de administración, esto le sucede a los de comunicación. Y es bastante particular porque esto ayuda a que también conozcamos esas nuevas formas, esos avances que hay en las temáticas y cómo lo trabajan otros países. Esto también nos ayuda un poco a adaptarnos a nuevos entornos y a realidades académicas diferentes. En Colombia, nuestra escala de calificación o de notas es de 1 a 5, pero en otros países es de 1 a 10, de 1 a 20. Particularmente, y voy a hablar del caso de Alemania, por ejemplo, el 1 es la mejor nota, es la nota excelente. Y eso a veces nos juega una mala pasada y nuestros estudiantes han pensado cuando han estado en Alemania que han reprobado o han perdido sus cursos cuando ven un 1 en sus notas, en sus calificaciones. Entonces eso también genera una dinámica que es bastante interesante, que se presentan situaciones particulares de entendimiento intercultural, pero que aún así son muy bien valorados. Así en algún punto se haya convertido en un asunto un poco difícil de manejar, porque hay choques culturales, por supuesto. Siempre hay algo bueno que surge de estas experiencias. Ese como el primer beneficio. Un segundo beneficio, y realmente con esta es que todo cambia, vivir una experiencia internacional o intercultural nos ayuda a desarrollar las competencias interculturales de liderazgo y de ciudadanía global. En este mundo globalizado e interconectado en el que todos vivimos, porque ya la pandemia nos enseñó que el mundo está más que conectado, hiperconectado, en algunos puntos ya, o algunos expertos hablan de la hiperconexión que tiene nuestro mundo. Nos dimos cuenta que en nuestro día a día, pero también cuando salgamos de la universidad a nuestros trabajos, vamos a necesitar de esas competencias interculturales, porque también cada persona es un mundo, cada grupo es un mundo, y esto, vivir una experiencia internacional y de intercambio nos ayuda a fomentar la empatía y a ser unos mejores ciudadanos, a entender las diferencias que hay entre nosotros, a entenderlas, a valorarlas, pero también a respetarlas. Y esto nos va a permitir desenvolvernos muy bien en cualquier lugar donde lleguemos a trabajar o a formar parte de un grupo, de una organización. Desarrollar habilidades para liderar en ambientes multiculturales es algo que sin duda alguna las experiencias de intercambio internacionales nos ayuda a forjar. No necesariamente tienen que estar en una clase, en un curso, en una asignatura, porque el hecho de salirnos de nuestra zona de confort nos permite aprender, y el medio y el contexto nos obliga un poco a, o se nos hace mucho más evidente el tema de las diferencias que puede haber. Y cuando somos conscientes de esas diferencias, allí es cuando también las aprendemos a valorar. Un tercer beneficio es aprender o practicar otro idioma cuando vamos a países que no tienen nuestro mismo idioma. En el caso, y quiero hablar de este caso que siempre lo cuento con mucha felicidad, y es que cuando mis estudiantes van a Brasil, regresan con un nivel de portugués altísimo, envidiable, que yo digo, me encantaría irme para Brasil, hacer un intercambio, porque logran sumergirse en la cultura. Ustedes en Brasil son supremamente acogedores y todos mis estudiantes que han estado en Brasil, yo puedo decir que son casos de éxito por lo que aprenden, por lo que viven, y siempre, siempre recomiendo irse a Brasil por todo lo que su hermoso país le puede ofrecer a los estudiantes en términos lingüísticos, porque van a adquirir un segundo idioma. Pero también hay estudiantes que deciden irse a países como Italia, como Bélgica, o algunos a aprender idiomas a Estados Unidos, a Malta. Estas son experiencias que realmente nos ayudan de manera mucho más ágil a sumergirnos en el idioma, a mejorar la fluidez, a mejorar la pronunciación, y también nos ayuda mucho a darnos cuenta que las bases académicas de aprender un idioma en un aula de clase también son muy importantes, porque sin esas bases que nos ofrecen, que nos brindan en las universidades, va a ser difícil poder avanzar rápidamente en el aprendizaje de otro idioma. Entonces aquí también quiero dejarles ese mensaje, y es que aprovechen al máximo las clases de lengua extranjera que les pueda ofrecer o que les ofrece su universidad, porque inmediatamente ustedes salgan al exterior, el proceso de adaptación va a ser rapidísimo, y la fluidez y todo va a mejorar en casi 2 meses, que es el tiempo que mis estudiantes, cuando converso con ellos, que regresan de las experiencias, me dicen que ya el primer mes y los 2 meses tienen una fluidez. Y por supuesto, pues otro beneficio es que se aprende de una manera más natural y en un entorno más cotidiano. También expresiones que no es muy usual que nosotros las aprendamos, o que no es usual en nuestro contexto usarlas, pues porque no las requerimos. Entonces eso también ayuda mucho a incrementar el nivel de vocabulario, y es uno de los grandes beneficios. Y aquí también con estas experiencias internacionales todo cambia. En el beneficio número 4, bueno, como les mencionaba ahora, se aprenden habilidades, competencias interculturales y de liderazgo, pero también queremos ser exploradores del mundo y de otras formas de vida y de otras formas de vivir. Y en línea con eso que les mencionaba en ese beneficio 2, también a través de vivir estas experiencias ampliamos la sensibilidad y el respeto hacia otros y hacia sus culturas, pero también fortalecemos nuestro sentido de identidad, porque cuando yo vivo en la diferencia, me puedo reconocer a mí mismo quién soy, cuál es mi origen, de dónde vengo, cuáles son mis costumbres, mi gastronomía, mi forma de comunicarme, e inclusive mi forma de pensar, que puede variar mucho. Y cuando entendemos la diversidad del mundo, lo admiramos, lo valoramos y lo apreciamos, no vamos a querer dejar de explorar el mundo y de aprender de otras culturas, porque siempre, siempre va a haber algo nuevo que aprender en temas culturales. Les pongo aquí Colombia porque realmente yo quiero hoy dejarles la invitación a que piensen en Colombia como un destino académico y educativo. Colombia tiene mucho para ofrecerles. Colombia, al igual que Brasil, es un país muy diverso. Tenemos selva, tenemos desierto, tenemos sabana, tenemos montañas, particularmente. Yo vivo en la montaña, Medellín está en la montaña. Tenemos mares, ríos, somos muy biodiversos, y, y de cierta manera no es un país tan inmenso como el de ustedes y tan grande y tan bello, pero aquí podemos fácilmente trasladarnos y en menos de 1 o 2 horas estar inmerso en una cultura diferente. Estamos divididos por 5 regiones: la costa Caribe, la costa Pacífica, la Amazonía, la región andina, que es donde yo estoy en estos momentos, la Orinoquía. Bueno, aquí es invitarlos a que conozcan un poquito de Colombia, pero también busquen cuáles son esos temas que trabajamos que sean de su interés y que nos vean como ese destino educativo predilecto en América Latina, donde con toda seguridad van a ser muy bien acogidos. El beneficio 4 ya lo veníamos, digamos, comentando un poco sobre las nuevas visiones del mundo y las disciplinas de estudio y nuevos enfoques, nuevas perspectivas académicas. Es ampliar la visión de lo que estamos aprendiendo o de los temas de nuestro interés de campos de estudio. Siempre en todo lugar donde ustedes vayan va a haber una persona experta en los temas que son de su interés, una persona que muchas veces, y esto aquí me estoy adelantando a otro de los beneficios con las que se crean unas redes de contacto y unas amistades que a largo plazo nos van a permitir cimentar también muchas de las bases de trabajo académico que podamos pensar a futuro, o esos contactos o esas conexiones que podamos tener. En un beneficio 6, y aquí ya les decía que me venía adelantando un poco a este tema, y es que todo cambia, porque nuestra red de amigos se convierte en una red amplia, en una red de amigos en todo el mundo. Cuando ustedes viven una experiencia académica de intercambio, a las universidades a donde ustedes vayan, no solamente están los estudiantes locales, también hay estudiantes de muchos otros países que están realizando intercambio en esas instituciones. Y eso lo que permite es tener una diversidad. Eso permite conocer sin necesidad de viajar más allá, que siempre vamos a querer viajar más allá después de la primera experiencia internacional, pero ya estás conociendo un poco de la otra persona, de su cultura, de cómo vive, de su idioma, de su gastronomía, pero también en muchos casos, en el caso de mis estudiantes, muchos de ellos generan redes que a futuro, cuando hacen sus maestrías, sus posgrados o en temas laborales o de investigación, se convierten en unos apoyos muy, muy valiosos, y esto permite crear relaciones duraderas y contactos globales. Como lo decía, posibilidades de colaboración profesional y personal en el futuro. También pues tenemos estudiantes que han conseguido el amor en estas experiencias internacionales, y ahí sí que todo ha cambiado o que todo cambia, ¿cierto? Son cuestiones impredecibles que nuestros estudiantes pues muchos han vivido en estas experiencias, entonces se hacen realmente muy hermosas estas experiencias cuando surgen ese tipo de cuestiones. El beneficio 7, y es mejora, vivir una experiencia de intercambio, sin duda alguna, mejora el perfil profesional, mejora el nivel de empleabilidad que podamos tener. Nos convertimos en aspirantes a alguna labor o a algún trabajo mucho más atractivos para las personas que hacen la selección de los cargos o de los trabajos. Y esto está muy relacionado con el tema que les venía mencionando sobre esas habilidades de liderazgo, las competencias interculturales. El desarrollar esto y se evidencia en esas pruebas psicotécnicas que a veces nos hacen en procesos de selección. Esto se logra evidenciar ahí sin necesidad de tener que exteriorizarlo o demostrarlo. Esto nos brinda una percepción muy diferente sobre nosotros mismos y de cómo nos proyectamos hacia los demás. Cuando yo digo que todo cambia es porque cuando vivimos experiencias en el extranjero, muchas veces no vamos con el propósito de cambiar de conocer, y no nos damos cuenta de los cambios profundos que tienen este tipo de experiencias en nuestras vidas. A veces minimizamos o subestimamos todo lo que nos brindan las posibilidades de estar en el extranjero, en vivir una experiencia de intercambio, una experiencia realmente con un propósito académico. Miren, y aquí yo ahora les decía que no es lo mismo ser turista a realmente ser una persona que logra insertarse en una nueva cultura. Cuando tú vas de turista no se generan grandes cambios, realmente porque tú vas, conoces, disfrutas. En el afán del turista uno no genera relaciones, en el afán del turismo uno olvida hacer muchas cosas o en el afán del turista uno no se detiene a contemplar ni a mirar, mientras que cuando son experiencias un poco más amplias de tiempo o cuando vamos con un propósito académico, las universidades o las instituciones que nos acogen y que nos reciben, siempre procuramos ir más allá del ojo del turista y tratamos de que vean, vivan y se sientan como personas locales, personas del lugar y demostrarles cómo se vive, en este caso hablar cómo se vive en Medellín, cómo se toma un bus en Medellín, cómo se toma el metro en la ciudad, cómo funciona todo en temas de seguridad, de alimentación, de centros comerciales. Es un ojo muy diferente y por eso digamos que el énfasis de esto que yo quiero compartirles hoy no es en vivir una experiencia internacional simplemente en el hecho de salir al exterior y decir, listo, yo ya estuve en el exterior, cumplí. No, es de ser conscientes de todo lo que puede llegar a brindar una experiencia académica internacional de largo plazo o que por lo menos si no es de largo plazo tenga un propósito claro, un propósito académico y algo que nos permita ir más allá. Y sobre todo, si en algún punto lo vamos a hacer como turistas, siempre tratemos de ir más allá, de no ir a los lugares más concurridos o donde siempre va el turista, sino de ir a los lugares donde van las personas de la ciudad realmente. En estos procesos de turistificación o gentrificación, a veces caemos en ir a esos lugares donde vemos en su mayoría personas más extranjeras que personas locales. Sí, hay que conocer ese tipo de lugares, hay que estar en ese tipo de lugares porque queremos tener el recuerdo, la foto, por supuesto, y luego ponerla en Instagram y que tengamos muchos likes. Pero también mi invitación es a vivir no como el turista, sino como un peregrino, alguien que vive día a día su ciudad y allí también van a encontrar mucha belleza. Miren, en todo el tema de intercambios, también están las posibilidades de estudiar en muy buenas universidades en todo el mundo a bajo costo. Esto porque hay becas, porque hay convenios, porque hay universidades muy generosas también que en muchas ocasiones quieren tener estudiantes extranjeros porque han comprendido que en este ejercicio de generar procesos de interculturalidad, tener personas de otros lugares contribuye mucho a desarrollar las habilidades o las competencias interculturales que les había hablado antes. Yo llegué a esta bonita relación, a este bonito relacionamiento con su universidad, precisamente gracias a uno de los programas que tenemos en América Latina, que es el programa PILA, que es el programa de intercambio académico latinoamericano. Ya una de nuestras profes tuvo la fortuna de estar con ustedes allá en Brasil. Y déjenme decirle que la profe más feliz no pudo llegar de su acompañamiento, de su calidez. Y son programas que nos ayudan y que ofrecen becas no solo para los docentes, para los profes, para las profesoras o profesores, sino también para los estudiantes. Y así también seguramente el gobierno de Brasil, así como lo hace el gobierno de Colombia, tiene oportunidades, o también otros gobiernos tienen oportunidades para vivir estas experiencias internacionales. Eh, Sabemos, y yo sé, y en la universidad somos conscientes de que hacer una experiencia internacional requiere dinero, requiere recursos, plata, como decimos nosotros en Colombia. Pero también otro mensaje importante es que hay oportunidades y becas en el exterior, y que también no es el hecho de esperar a que llegue, sino de que ustedes también puedan buscar esas oportunidades, pero más que buscarlas es que también se puedan preparar. Si yo quiero ir a otro país, entonces, y por medio de una beca, entonces debo tener un excelente promedio académico. Si siempre he querido ir a algún país, pues debo prepararme en el idioma de ese país. Que si me piden un examen, tal vez en algunas de las becas, listo, me preparo, estudio, busco de qué se trata el examen. Y esto, sin duda alguna, miren, muchas veces las becas se pierden. En Colombia muchas de las becas se han perdido para que extranjeros vengan a estudiar aquí al país, y es porque realmente no nos preparamos para postularnos a una beca. Y desde ya ustedes que están en su pregrado, en su carrera universitaria, y si tienen este propósito de avanzar en un programa de posgrado en otro país, se tienen que preparar desde ya. Tienen que visualizarse y pensarse en las oportunidades que existen y que están en el medio actualmente. Son también muy buenas universidades. Y bueno, esto va en línea a lo que les quiero mostrar ahora, un poco sobre las oportunidades que pueden tener aquí en Colombia. Todo cambia, y les venía diciendo que todo cambia especialmente porque participar en un proceso de intercambio nos ayuda a conocernos a nosotros mismos. A veces no somos conscientes de todas las capacidades que tenemos. A veces no somos conscientes del nivel de independencia que podemos llegar a tener. Y estas experiencias de intercambio nos cambia esa mirada, nos cambia ese chip, nos cambia ese pensamiento, y aprendemos y conocemos que somos capaces de lograr eso, de vivir una experiencia en el extranjero, pero que también somos capaces de muchas más cosas, de descubrir habilidades y talentos nuevos. Tal vez cuando uno estaba en la universidad, pues que todavía vive en la casa de familia, con su papá, con su mamá, con el abuelo, la abuela, los tíos, que tradicionalmente se encargan pues de todo el tema de alimentación. No nos damos cuenta que hasta somos buenos chefs, somos buenos cocineros, somos buenos en la cocina, y que nos puede llegar a gustar la cocina, ¿cierto? Ese es como por darles un ejemplo solamente de todo lo que uno llega a descubrir, ¿cierto? Y así muchas habilidades también, el de aprender tal vez a estar solo, que también es importante, y es un asunto que sobre todo en las experiencias internacionales es lo más difícil a veces de enfrentar esa soledad, porque vamos a estar lejos de nuestra casa, de nuestra familia, de nuestra pareja, de nuestros amigos, de nuestra universidad, porque en muchos casos también extrañamos la universidad, a nuestros profesores, en la forma como se comportan. En América Latina somos muy cercanos en nuestras relaciones con los profesores. pero tal vez en otros países esas relaciones de cercanía no existen. Y uno comienza a sentirse un poco distante, alienado, a que un profesor no te pregunte cómo estás y no llegue directo a dar su clase. Y eso genera unos movimientos en uno mismo como persona y realmente aprendemos también a valorar muchas cosas, a valorarnos, a conocernos. Y como les decía ahora con el tema cultural, a identificarnos qué somos, qué no somos y qué queremos ser. Hace parte de descubrirnos y de todo lo que cambia viviendo una experiencia internacional. Hay una también que es un beneficio que me ha parecido muy interesante, que muchos de mis estudiantes que han estado en el extranjero han hecho, y es traer nuevas ideas de los países donde han estado para crear o emprender aquí, por ejemplo, en Colombia. O también los estudiantes internacionales que han estado aquí en Medellín, en Colombia, también se han llevado muy buenas ideas para emprender en el extranjero, cosas nuevas, cosas que tal vez no existan o no hayan llegado a sus países de origen o no hayan llegado aquí a Colombia. Entonces también ellos comienzan a explorar, a indagar si eso funcionaría, hacer estudios, hacer inversiones. Y tenemos muy buenos también casos de éxito en este aspecto, porque realmente estar en el extranjero también nos inspira, nos da nuevos conocimientos, nos impulsa a generar nuevos proyectos, a aprender de otros mercados y de otros modelos de negocio. Yo quiero contarles un ejemplo de esto, y es que nosotros tenemos un programa de doble titulación de nuestro programa de gastronomía aquí de la Universidad Católica Luis Amigó. Y este programa de gastronomía tiene, los estudiantes se van un año a México, están un año allí, y también los estudiantes mexicanos tienen la posibilidad de venir a Colombia a hacer una estancia de un año, una estancia académica, y al final obtienen el título de ambas instituciones. Pues los estudiantes mexicanos encontraron aquí en Colombia unos lugares muy pequeños en los que se venden granizados. Un granizado es un hielo, ¿cierto? No sé, hielo raspado, hielo con sabores, sabor de fresa, sabor de mora, de piña o sabores artificiales. Y esto estaba en sus países, claro que sí. Pues todos consumimos hielo, no es helado, no es ice cream, es hielo con sabores, como nieve. Pero ¿cuál fue lo que les llamó a ellos mucho más la atención? Y es que en Colombia, en estos lugares que son muy pequeños, que son espacios muy coloridos también, los venden y les añaden algo de licor. Y esto, según ellos, en su país no estaba. Y esa es la idea que ellos hoy en día en México están desarrollando. Miren que es lo mismo que han vendido tradicionalmente, pero solo agregarle un ingrediente, y esto en su país no estaba. Entonces ahora tienen esa idea, ya regresaron a su país y están trabajando fuertemente para, poder desarrollar esta idea de negocio. Pero no solamente el hecho de vender el producto, es también el hecho de cómo se mueve el mercado aquí en Colombia de ese producto, a qué grupo de interés le gusta, si es a jóvenes, si es a personas más adultas, por supuesto, pues a niños no, porque no es posible o no debería serlo. Pero también ellos analizaron los colores que usan estos lugares, por qué tienen luces de neón, por ejemplo, por qué siempre tienen música, qué logran ahí, cómo logran también atraer al público para que consuma este producto. Entonces también con esto es que a veces cuando viajamos no somos conscientes de ver, somos muy conscientes de la novedad, pero no nos percatamos tal vez de encontrar las diferencias o similitudes que eso puede hacer o que pueden haber en mi país. Son ideas que sin duda alguna pues van a requerir análisis, ¿cierto? Versión, por supuesto, pero que realmente nos ayudan a desarrollar también modelos e ideas que van a ser supremamente innovadores en nuestros países. Aquí como una recomendación, eran 10 beneficios de los que yo quería hablarles a ustedes el día de hoy. Y es que realmente las oficinas de relaciones internacionales, las oficinas de internacionalización, siempre buscamos que nuestra comunidad académica viva las experiencias, explórenlas, consúltenlas, porque siempre las publicamos y las difundimos en nuestras redes sociales, en Instagram, en Facebook, TikTok en algunos casos. Cuando les lleguen las oportunidades también al correo electrónico, léanlas, por favor, no nos ignoren. Nuestros correos electrónicos donde les brindamos información. Y también pregunten, es válido, así no nos vayamos a postular alguna de esas opciones que tienen nuestras universidades. Pregunten, consulten, indaguen y comiencen a ver esas nuevas experiencias que nosotros trabajamos fuertemente desde nuestras universidades para que ustedes puedan vivir no solamente experiencias de viaje, también hay experiencias muy interesantes de profesores que pueden que pueden estar en su universidad, de los que ustedes también pueden aprender muchísimo sin necesidad de movilizarse o de grandes inversiones de dinero. Ustedes también pueden, como les dije ahora, tener ese pedacito del mundo en su universidad, que nosotros denominamos los encargados de las oficinas de relaciones internacionales, denominamos experiencias de internacionalización en casa. Con esto, yo quiero terminar estos beneficios. Hasta aquí me gustaría leer o escuchar algunas de sus impresiones sobre esto, mientras aquí voy revisando un poco. Bueno, aquí les dejo un código QR para que por favor lo escaneen. Voy a dejarlo aquí unos minutos o unos segundos más para que por favor lo escaneen y entren a la información. La información que al inicio de esta conferencia les dije que quería compartirles. Y se trata de las becas Colombia. Las becas Colombia son unas becas que promueve una institución en nuestro país que se llama el ICETEX. El ICETEX es el Instituto Colombiano de Estudios en el Exterior, pero esta entidad también se encarga de canalizar todas las becas que le llegan al país, becas para colombianos, pero también son encargados de promover a Colombia como un destino educativo. Las becas salen cada año. Normalmente puede variar mucho el número de becas, puede haber 50 o hasta 100. Esto también depende mucho pues del presupuesto que pueda haber para determinada convocatoria. Y son para cursar programas de posgrado, especializaciones, maestrías y doctorados. Voy a detener pantalla porque quiero entrar a la página web y mostrarles un poco. Hay una versión del documento de las becas en portugués para que ustedes también puedan explorar un poquito. Miren, ¿por qué las quiero traer hoy? Porque a veces pensamos que viajar al extranjero requiere mucho dinero. Sí, por supuesto. Pero aquí es donde yo les decía que el dinero no sea un obstáculo para ustedes vivir este tipo de experiencias. Espérenme por aquí un momento que estoy abriendo el documento. ¿Qué oportunidades hay? Y que ustedes pueden ser merecedores de estas oportunidades. Voy a compartir pantalla. No sé si ya están viendo allí. Creo que sí. Creo que ya están viendo las becas. Esta es la versión en portugués de las becas Colombia. ¿Sí la están viendo ya? Ok, listo. Perfecto. Gracias. Ahí ya la estaba yo también viendo en pantalla. También, es que miren, son unas becas tan buenas. Nosotros en estos momentos tenemos a un estudiante de Ecuador con nosotros en una de las becas Colombia del ICETEX. Y es un estudiante que está haciendo su maestría en administración con nosotros. Es un estudiante al que el ICETEX le cubre tiquetes aéreos, le da manutención durante los 2 años que va a vivir en Colombia, es decir, le da un dinero, un recurso para que viva durante los 2 años que dura el programa en Colombia, le ayuda con la visa para que pueda entrar al país sin ningún inconveniente y pueda hacer su programa, le dan seguro médico para que en caso de que en algún punto se llegue a enfermar o no se sienta bien, pueda ir al médico, le dan un recurso de instalación en el país, para un recurso porque de todas maneras uno necesita comprar cosas, comprar utensilios, sábanas, bueno, almohadas. Les dan apoyo para que luego de tener su visa, todos los ciudadanos extranjeros en Colombia deben sacar una identificación, un ID. Y para los estudiantes que no hablan español, pero que se ganan la beca, también los apoyan con clases de español, por lo menos de 6 meses antes de integrarse al programa para que pueda ser realmente exitoso su paso por aquí, por Colombia. Les dan apoyo económico también para libros y materiales. Son becas que, como les dije, salen una vez al año. Bueno, y además de esto, no pagan ningún recurso por su matrícula, no pagan matrícula. También les dan el 100% de valor de la mensualidad durante toda la duración del programa. Esto no es por el primero, por el segundo semestre, no, esto es durante todo el programa si ustedes se ganan las becas. Por ejemplo, en este año, la convocatoria cerró el 11 de junio. Aquí están los requisitos: ser un ciudadano extranjero, no tener nacionalidad colombiana, deben tener un buen promedio, no más de 50 años, el promedio general de 4 a 5. Ya hay unos procesos pues, administrativos que ustedes pueden buscar, los programas académicos de su interés. Déjenme ver si está el catálogo. La oferta académica es muy amplia. Somos muchas las universidades en Colombia que ofrecemos becas en este programa. Así que tengan la seguridad que siempre van a encontrar programas que son de su interés, programas académicos, que son de su interés. Bueno, en la información que les envié, en el QR, pueden entrar y pueden ver toda la oferta académica. Y no es solamente en Medellín, también es en Bogotá, en Cali, en Barranquilla. Son muchas las ciudades donde están ubicadas las universidades que ofrecen estas becas. Y como les digo, son becas, aquí ya rápidamente les voy a contar para no mostrarles. Les voy a decir cuántos programas académicos ofrecieron becas para que tengan un poco la idea de la dimensión de estas becas y que realmente se preparen para participar en ellas. Aquí estoy, el computador me está haciendo el recuento y van más de 800 programas en los que las universidades propusimos para brindar becas bajo este programa de becas Colombia. Bueno, ya van en los 1000, no voy a avanzar más, ya nos queda claro que son muchas las áreas de conocimiento en las que ustedes podrían integrarse. Entonces, quería dejarles esta información, además de contarles un poco de los beneficios que tienen estas experiencias internacionales. Y mi mensaje es, proyéctense, piensen en vivir una experiencia internacional. No piensen en los obstáculos como el dinero. Cuando queremos, podemos llegar a estas oportunidades y ya el dinero y las oportunidades vendrán, pero también hay que estar preparado para cuando lleguen las oportunidades de vivir en el extranjero. Y sean conscientes también de que esto los va a cambiar y una experiencia de estas los cambiará para siempre. Para siempre, para siempre. Cuando vivimos y logramos adaptarnos de manera exitosa, no vamos a dejar de hablar nunca de nuestras experiencias en el extranjero. Esto, al igual que es una experiencia académica, también se convierte en una experiencia de vida. Por eso, les decía desde el inicio que todo cambia luego de una experiencia internacional. Muchas gracias por haberme escuchado este tiempo y aquí estoy a su disposición. Aquí estoy para escucharles tal vez alguna impresión o alguna pregunta que puedan tener a partir de este momento. Y nuevamente, gracias Candice por tenerme presente. Thank you so much for the invitation to this event. And I hope you have liked my conference. Thank you.
So just so we can come here, so we can see you. We can see your name.
Hola, yo llegué en el final, entonces solo tuve un poco de conocimiento, entonces yo solo tengo una curiosidad.
Sí.
Una vez que pasamos y tenemos una beca, tiene un medio de mantenerla, ¿no? Es integral, pero puede ocurrir de que si yo no logro lo suficiente o en el programa académico no tengo mucho éxito, ¿puedo perderlo?
Sí, realmente es necesario trabajar duro por mantener la beca, porque también es importante ser consciente de que me están pagando todo, que el gobierno de Colombia te está pagando para que vivas en Colombia. Y también uno de los compromisos es que seas o sigas siendo un muy buen estudiante, un excelente alumno mientras estés participando en la beca. Pero no seamos negativos. Siempre pensemos en que el llegar acá nos va a exigir al máximo y que vamos a hacer todo lo posible por mantener la beca. Pero sí te digo algo y es que el promedio que exige el gobierno de Colombia para que continúes con la beca no es muy alto. Realmente el promedio es de 4 sobre 5. ¿Fui claro? Sí. ¿Y qué buen español tienes?
Grades are very important. So I think that students should always bear in mind that the best students always get ahead. So that's like
That's right.
mandatory, actually. It's mandatory.
Yeah, sure.
Mais alguma pergunta? Oi? Sim, sim. Já, já. Well, Santiago, I have a question for you. Well, actually, first I have, if you could send me the link for
Sure.
the becas for the convocatória, that would
Okay.
be great.
This
And
call
I
was
can,
for this year, but as I mentioned before, the call is every year.
okay,
So the information it's updated every year. So it's important to check. Maybe on April or March or April, the next call. But this is a very good reference for you all.
okay, well, I expect to be with you in April.
Oh, great. Yeah, I
We're
know.
working on that.
I've
We're
been
working
told.
on that. Yeah,
Professor Claudia told me about that, and she's so excited.
yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to meeting everyone
I don't know.
too.
Can I? I'm not sure, but I send the link via WhatsApp. Okay,
What?
because I don't
Okay.
know. Maybe in the chat here, but also via WhatsApp.
Okay, that's fine. And I will keep the link, and then when it is updated, I will publish it on our website so students
Sure.
can see the
And
overall
perfect. And
proposal.
for the next call for um, 2025, I'll send the information. As soon as the call is open, I will give you the link.
Thank you very much. And now the question regarding cooperation agreement that we are working on.
Yeah.
Which, and this information is for the other students from other courses. If you could talk about a little bit about which courses the university has in humanities, that's our field.
Por supuesto. And I'm going to switch into
To
Spanish.
Spanish. Okay,
Sorry.
fine.
Muy bien. Bueno, la Universidad Católica Luis Amigó es una universidad privada y está localizada en la ciudad de Medellín. Aquí tenemos su sede principal, pero también estamos presentes en otras ciudades de Colombia. Estamos presentes en Bogotá, en Manizales, en Apartadó y Montería, que son otras ciudades del país. Nuestra universidad tiene 6 facultades. Tiene la Facultad de Ciencias Sociales, Salud y Bienestar. Tiene la Facultad de Educación y Humanidades. Tiene la Facultad de Derecho y Ciencias Políticas, la Facultad de Ingenierías y Arquitectura, Ciencias Administrativas, Económicas y Contables y la Facultad de Comunicación, Publicidad y Diseño. En el área de las humanidades, realmente de las humanidades y de las ciencias sociales es el fuerte de nuestra universidad. Todo el tema que tiene que ver con psicología, desarrollo familiar, teología, filosofía, educación, trabajo social, derecho, son nuestras áreas fuertes, sin desmeritar las otras áreas que también tiene, por supuesto, la universidad, que también son muy buenas, por ejemplo, en el campo de la comunicación, también muy buenos en el área del diseño, de la publicidad, también nuestra universidad es muy, muy, muy fuerte. Somos una universidad que somos de una orientación católica, pero eso no implica que las personas que estamos aquí en la universidad tengamos que profesar la religión católica. Somos un campus y una comunidad diversa y aceptamos y valoramos esas diferencias que puede haber. Así que aquí todas las personas, independiente de su origen, religión, son bienvenidas. Todas las personas son bienvenidas y trabajamos fuertemente en promover este tema de la diversidad. Y hay un programa aquí en la universidad que se llama Amigó Diversa y es donde promovemos la diversidad en nuestra universidad. Nuestras carreras son normalmente de entre 4 y 5 años. Nuestras especializaciones son de 1 año, las maestrías son de 2 y los doctorados son de 3 años. Nosotros comenzamos actividades académicas o las clases, mejor, inician aquí en el mes de enero y terminan en mayo y vuelven e inician en el mes de julio, finales de julio, y terminan en noviembre. También por si en algún momento ustedes quieren venir a Colombia a hacer un intercambio aquí a la Universidad Católica Luis Amigó, son bienvenidos en el marco de ese convenio que estamos trabajando con la UBA. También les quiero adelantar algo por aquí y es que, Candice, vamos a abrir una convocatoria. Yo sé que ustedes ya vienen trabajando con nuestro programa de enseñanza de inglés. Vamos a abrir convocatoria para que un estudiante, ustedes están invitados, por supuesto, del área de letras, a que nos ayude a fortalecer el aprendizaje del portugués aquí en nuestra universidad. Hay muchas personas interesadas en aprender portugués, tenemos profes de portugués, pero cuando hay personas que son nativas o que su lengua materna es el portugués, nos ayuda mucho a mejorar las habilidades de nuestros estudiantes y de nuestros profes. Y esto va a tener beca de alojamiento y alimentación. Y los estudiantes van a poder tomar asignaturas también o tomar cursos mientras están aquí apoyando a nuestros profesores en la enseñanza del portugués. Entonces yo espero a más tardar el 15 de noviembre poder enviarte la convocatoria para que tus estudiantes se puedan postular. Es una convocatoria dirigida a estudiantes y en algún caso también, pues esto puede ser reconocido también si su universidad así lo define y así lo decide, como también una forma de realizar práctica académica. Eso es como el contexto de nuestra universidad.
We will share the call here, and I am sure that we will have lots of students interested. I'm currently working with Marcela. We're going to exchange classes, so it will be online.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
I know about that process, and it's very interesting.
Yes, and that is for the students who need credits, teaching credits. So yeah.
That's the idea for our call, for the call, and that's the idea that your students could have teaching credits as well.
Great, fantastic. I could spend the whole afternoon talking to you, but I know that you have lots of work to do and you're extremely busy. So thank you very much for being with us today. And it was a great pleasure talking to you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Uva, for being so welcoming. Thank you so much for our professor Angela. She's like astonished as the way you treat her, and so thank you for all you do for maintain these relations, and I hope we keep working for many years more.
Yes, me too. Angela, it was lovely. It was really a great pleasure to have her here.
Okay, thank you.
I expect to see her soon as well, so that would be great.
Great. Okay.
Okay, Santiago, well, thank you very much. I'll let you go and say goodbye to the camera so you can see me. And hope to talk to you soon.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Ok, seguindo com a nossa programação, que está um pouquinho atrasada, a nossa última guest of the afternoon, nós vamos falar agora de um lançamento do livro Esther, O Vento Soprou, Tudo Mudou. E a nossa convidada é a Marjorie Galbraith. E para deixar vocês curiosos um pouco, eu trouxe o livro e vou ler só um pedacinho aqui, que é a apresentação. Coisa rápida.
Hello. Hello, are you passing it word to me?
I'm just going to read a short introduction to the book.
Okay. Sorry.
You will be able to talk.
Okay, no problem. I'm just waiting.
O livro originalmente ele foi escrito em português, certo? Mas a experiência é uma experiência que ocorrida na África, certo? Então, o país era chamado de Rodésia e a Marjorie morava lá. Então, a história é um pouco de realidade misturada com ficção. E eu vou ler aqui a apresentação do livro. Então, na Rodésia, quando essa história começou em 1957, o palco estava montado. Nenhum dos atores recebeu o convite ou tinha ideia de estar participando de um cenário que evoluiria independentemente de sua vontade ou consentimento. Sem saber, foram atraídos para a teia da mudança pela mão mística que os moveu, como se estivessem conectados por fios invisíveis. Vinham ensinar ou aprender, ajudar ou atrapalhar, odiar ou amar, conforme a mão mandava, e ficavam ou saíam do cenário na hora e no local designados, sem respeito aos seus domínios de poder, controle, conhecimento ou projeto. À medida que os eventos se desenrolavam, a crença inabalável no amor e na confiança emergia claramente como vetor para o destino favorecido daqueles que permitiam que dominassem suas ações. Esta encontrava-se no meio de toda essa agitação. Segundo a lei tribal, ela passará a ficar sob o controle dos seus parentes masculinos após a morte acidental de seu pai. Assim, como dependia deles, não tinha recursos para que lhe permitissem recusar-se a obedecer, pelo que foi obrigada a cumprir o contrato que tinham feito. Apesar da aparente impossibilidade da situação, seu sonho de ser uma mulher negra instruída estava tão firmemente enraizado na sua cabeça que a mente criativa nunca parou de maquinar a fim de encontrar uma saída para o dilema. Então, a Marjorie vai compartilhar um pouco dessa escrita, né, desse livro, e uma coisa assim que eu queria passar para vocês. A Marjorie sempre quis ser escritora, e nem sempre a vida nos deixa fazer o que nós queremos fazer, quando queremos fazer. As circunstâncias às vezes não permitem. Mas ela nunca desistiu. Então hoje ela tem 90 anos. E ela publicou o livro que ela queria. Então, never give up, né? Essa é a mensagem que eu tenho para vocês e certamente ela também vai compartilhar isso com vocês. Então, com vocês, Marjorie Galbraith. You're on, Grandma. You can talk in English or in Portuguese.
Ok. Então, em primeiro lugar, desculpa. Eu quero agradecer à doutora Candice pelo convite. Minha garganta está um pouco comprometida hoje, porque eu tenho um problema que eu acho que é psicossomática. Ele volta de vez em quando eu fico emocionado, ok? Então, a Candice já explicou mais ou menos o pano de fundo da vida da Esther, porque os anos 70, como o mundo já está cansado de saber, era uma época de início de grandes mudanças no mundo todo. Houve o Woodstock, que os americanos começam a recusar de ser alistada para a luta em Vietnã, Coreia, custando milhares de dólares para a América, sem realmente contribuir nada à vida de ninguém. Muito bem, contra esse pano de fundo, muitas colônias em toda a parte do mundo, franceses, belgas, alemães, ingleses, principalmente britânicos, porque Britânia era uma grande colonizadora e tinha muito grande parte da África. Então, Macmillan, o primeiro-ministro, fez uma grande discurso, The Winds of Change, o vento que muda tudo, soprou e muda tudo. Então, após isso, muitas colônias na África começam a se rebelar contra ser dominada por Britânia. Os Mau em Quênia já começam nos anos 60, os belgas de Congo, no início dos anos 70 também. E na época que a Esther apareceu na cena, a luta contra os governos brancos que dominavam a África já estava em plena guerra com os assim chamados terroristas, que se chamaram lutadores para a liberdade. Então, tinha um conflito das ideologias, para começar, mas não deixou de ter consequências gravíssimas, porque até nas cidades, terrorismo urbano começou a começar. Então, como a história da Esther começou para mim em 77, quando ela chegou na minha casa, naquela noite fatídica, quando o policial a resgatou ela desceu do ônibus, não tinha onde ir, ele trouxe ela para mim. A partir desse momento, eu fiquei muito feliz de ter um babá, e não me preocupava muito de onde ela vem, o que aconteceu com ela antes. Ela também não me contou. Aí, um belo dia, eu mandei ela para fazer umas compras, e ela simplesmente não voltou. Aí, transpareceu que o policial passou lá, escutou ela trancada no caminhão, ele reconheceu o registro desse caminhão, que já estava circulando lá faz um tempinho. Ele soltou trouxe de volta e me contou a história de pano de fundo, que os irmãos a contratou num casamento em troca de um caminhão, que era o preço da noiva, que era um costume entre os africanos tribais. Eu tenho que frisar tribal, né? Porque hoje muitos africanos, ex-colônias, não praticam mais o tribalismo própria, porque o que eles fazem? Eles dão opção. Você pode obedecer ao governo civil ou ao governo... Eles têm um tipo de paralelo. Os chefes ainda mandam nas áreas tribais, assim as pessoas têm opção de escolher se eles querem seguir as normas tribais ou modernos, europeus, baseados no estilo europeu. Em todo caso, no caso da Esther, em 76, os cavaleiros brancos governavam nas cidades principais e nas terras atribuídas para onde moram pessoas brancas. As áreas tribais eram governadas por os chefes tribais e eram afastados lá nos meios dos matos do Rhodesia. Então, tinha diversos, porque as tribos também tinham conflitos entre eles. Então, não podia simplesmente falar, tudo essa área é preto, tudo essa área é branco. Os indivíduos, tribos, tinham suas áreas. Matoko era onde o pai da Esther tinha voz alta. Ele mandou ela para a escola, porque ele estava prevendo que ia ter mudanças radicais. Ele também não queria que ela fosse uma mulher tribal, sujeito a ser de um monte de esposas de um outro chefe. Ele percebeu que a vida moderna ia exigir que tinha mulheres capacitadas para tomar sua parte no governo, nas escolas, na educação dos filhos, assim para frente. Então, criado nesse ambiente de educação e ambição de melhorar a vida, se encontra lá no meio do mato com esse chefe que queria tudo, com toda a força, queria engravidar ela logo para ela voltar para morar com as mulheres, porque o chefiado lá não tinha, assim, conceito de morar casais. Ele tem a casa dele, elas moravam lá no mato, ele visitava quando queria, escolhia a mulher que ele queria ficar com ela aquela vez, e assim para frente, né? Então, esse simplesmente não se conformou de simplesmente ser de um monte de mulheres, fica grávida toda hora, e não fazer nada além de capinhar terras, plantar milho, estampar milho, preparar comidas para os homens, lavar roupas para os homens, enfim, serviu os diversos homens a quem eles tinham, assim, um contrato de ser a mulher daquele, né? Ok. Então, quando ela percebeu que o chefe não ia desistir, ela simplesmente fugiu, sem saber onde ir, sem saber o que fazer depois. Essa é uma situação que eu acho que muitas mulheres, até civilizadas, enfrentam. Às vezes, você se sente... Eu, por exemplo, me sinto assim, trapped. Como que se diz trapped em português? Preso num casamento, porque naquela época se prometeu até a morte ou separe. Eu estava educada naquele sistema e ficou muito difícil me simplesmente abandonar. Eu tentei por 12 anos e, de repente, ficou claro que eu ia me matar lá tentando fazer esse negócio andar, e não vai nunca andar. Então, eu também saio fora sem saber onde ir, sem saber o que fazer. E meu pai me deu $2.000, um carro, e me fala, vai para a África do Sul, procura um emprego, sai daqui, porque esse homem não vai deixar você em paz. Divorciou, pagou advogado, tudo. Ele estava simplesmente determinada de parar com esse casamento, porque ele viu que eu estava sendo maltratado e não ia dar em nada nunca. Ok. Então, na África do Sul, eu tive a sorte de conhecer o homem que eventualmente eu fui esposa dele, Gordon Galbraith. Ele era uma pessoa maravilhosa que me resgatou de sentir-me um trapo, e me fez sentir uma pessoa querida, respeitada, e vale a pena de ser com ele. Então, depois de um namoro, uns 2 anos, eventualmente casamos em 70, fomos morar em Moçambique, e tive um contrato de 3 anos lá, que capotou quando os terroristas tomou conta em 73, e aí fomos convidados para Copersucar, um grupo que estava atendendo Copersucar, fomos para o Brasil. Isso é a minha história, como eu saio da África. Mas vamos voltar para 57, quando esta chegou na minha casa. Depois de eu saber do jeito que os irmãos estavam perseguindo ela para ela voltar para o marido dela, eu tentei ajudar ela em todas as maneiras para protegê-la. Mas, eventualmente, os irmãos mataram meu cachorro. Uma noite que a gente estava fora, quando voltou, achou o cachorro morto na calçada, e eu percebi que eles não iam desistir até que eles pegavam a Esther. Então, eu decidi abandonar a casa. A gente estava comprando ele no mesmo esquema que Caixa Econômica, você paga uma entrada, vai pagando 20, 30 anos. Eu tinha pago uns 2 anos. Meu ex-marido estava na Força Aérea, ausente de casa muitas vezes. Eu acho que foi um fator contribuidor ao desentendimento entre nós, porque quando você tem uma pessoa ausente a maior parte do tempo, você começa a agir sozinho, e quando a pessoa volta e quer mandar, você não aceita com tanta facilidade, porque muitas vezes o que ele quer mandar fazer, você já estava contra, né? Então, complicou. Aí, eu entreguei a casa, estava pronto para fazer mudança, quando os irmãos conseguiu raptar a Esther do quartinho dela, e eu nunca mais fiquei sabendo o que aconteceu com ela. Eu fui morar lá perto da casa da minha mãe, e ficou lá até eu decidi me divorciar e ir para a África do Sul em 67, 10 anos depois. Mas, em todo caso, para fins dessa história, essa que nunca me saiu da cabeça, essa menina tão valente, que lutava para estudar, que lutava para sair dessa situação terrível, consegui sair, e aí foi raptado. Pode ser que voltou para marido, ou pode ser que não, mas em todo fim, eu achava que não é difícil que eles até mataram ela. Então, eu não queria escrever uma história tão triste, tão negativa, para uma menina corajosa que enfrentava a vida com fé, porque ela sabia, ela estava consciente que tem um poder invisível, inteligência superior que mandava tudo na Terra. Você pode querer uma coisa, mas essa ser inteligente superior decide um outro destino para você. Então, eu tentei escrever uma história que mostra que quando você segue, aceita que o ser inteligente não queria aquele para você, você busca um alternativo guiado por seus sentimentos, guiado por seus instintos, que fala muito alto se você para escutar. E se você siga isso e vai trabalhando firme, as coisas boas chegam para você, enfim, né? Então, para mim, eu tentei manter a ideia de que o que faz mulheres escravas, às vezes, a um casamento ruim, é ter uma gravidez indesejada. Não que você culpa, coitado da criança que nasce, você ama seus filhos, você faz de tudo para eles terem uma boa vida, mas não deixa de ser como se diz, empecilho de simplesmente pegar suas coisas e vai embora. Porque você tem que pensar, como que eu vou sustentar 2 filhos sozinhos? Olha, eu falo para você, muitas mulheres africanas fazem isso. Eu não sei como eles conseguem. Porque morando lá no mato, sujeito a plantar milhos, colher milhos, pegar peixe no rio, alimentação é precária. E ter 2 ou 3 filhos, às vezes mais. Felizmente, o fato que eles moram em comunidade assim, eles dividem tudo entre elas. Eles têm que buscar água no rio, eles não têm luz, não têm água encanada, tem que fazer foguinho para fazer comida, tem que ir às vezes no rio para lavar roupa, tem o risco de ser pego por um crocodilo. É assim, vida no campo de mulheres africanas não é brincadeira. Essa conseguiu escapar, isso eu fiz ela fugir para Malawi, junto com o policial que a resgatou, e ter uma vida digna lá com ele. O resto da vida, eventualmente, ter 2 filhos, eu consegui a final feliz que eu sonhei para ela, mesmo se ela, na vida dela, não ouvi disso. Se alguém que tem alguma pergunta para fazer, pode fazer. Hello, Candice, are you still there?
On the camera. Okay, here we are. It is a little late, so I don't know if anyone has any questions, but
Okay.
I'll ask the students here. Alguém online tem perguntas?
Did that make sense? Because I just talked ad lib.
Yes, it made sense. It did. Perguntas? Perguntas? Venha lá.
Eu preciso dizer que, felizmente, as mulheres desde lá já tá com bastante possibilidade de estudar e de ter uma vida profissional, paralelo a cuidar uma casa, quando é assim que eles desejam. Eles não são obrigados a casar como antigamente se chama. A girl wasn't married by 18, she was left on the shelf.
Good evening, Miss Marjorie. Nice to meet you. It has been a pleasure to hear you, hear your lecture. It was an amazing conversation with all of us. I've just took all of your words very personally, and of course, I haven't had such experiences as you had. Amazing experiences. It's great to know that you have lived abroad. Unfortunately, many things have happened, but that's great that you came to Brazil and published your book. I'm very, very happy. I want to read your book now that I've heard of it, that I've heard its history, your history, and the story of the book that I found very personal, very touching. And I really long for your next stories.
Oh, my dear. I'll tell you something. I got discouraged writing in Portuguese because the editor that edited the first edition allowed a lot of my grammar mistakes and bad syntax to escape. And my son read the first page and he said, this is full of mistakes. I'm not having our name connected with so many grammar mistakes. So he had the book revised by a professional, and we published a second edition that was all correct. So I got discouraged writing in Portuguese because I make too many grammar mistakes. And I can't find anybody easily who will help me to translate and correct. And to pay a professional is very, very expensive. And if your book doesn't sell, what are you going to do? Just leave all that expense invested for nothing.
It's very expensive.
Yeah. So that's why I got discouraged. I don't know if I'll publish anything else. Just leave it for my net to see if they can figure out anything worth doing about it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Miss Marjorie, Mrs. Thank you. Thank you. It has been a pleasure, the greatest pleasure. I'm so happy that I'm here. I'm here. How do you say in person? I'm here in person at the video conference auditorium and not on YouTube because I think this is a greater experience because I can see in a larger screen and greater audio, and it has been amazing. Really, really congratulations for your book. Congratulations for your strength. Congratulations for the woman that you are, always have been. And thank you for sharing with us everything.
Okay, it's a pleasure. I'm very glad to be able to do that. It was a great honor. Thank you very much.
Okay, so anyone would like to ask another question? Last one for us to say good night. No?
I can't hear too well.
Okay, well, people are a little tired now because they have been studying all day and all
Okay,
afternoon.
okay. So they want to bring it to close.
Yes, we will close and we will talk later.
Okay, okay.
Okay. So thank you very much for sharing your story, and your book is here at our university for our students to read.
Oh, good. I hope they find it interesting and get the message that you can't just give up when fate puts a big barrier in your way and you think, oh my God, that's all I wanted in my life. Now look at this mess. You have to find something else to go on with and follow your instincts. Do the best you can with what you got and get on with it. Stop complaining, look for something, the way out.
It is true. Never give up and work hard. We'll get it.
People have got an idea that God is Father Christmas. All you have to do is ask and it just falls in your lap, but it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, you have to work for it.
Yeah.
Okay, then. So we'll say goodbye.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
Okay, God bless. Look after yourselves. Keep well and happy. That's the main thing.
Okay, thank
God
you.
bless. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Missão cumprida. Obrigada por todos estarem aqui. Amanhã nós teremos 3 palestrantes, começando às 14 horas. Nós teremos primeiro às 14 horas uma palestra em Linguística com a professora Claudia Marcela. Ela voltará para falar sobre uma pesquisa que ela está realizando. Às 15 horas nós temos uma palestra com o professor Jorge Enrique, Medellín in Short Film Festival, a blended experience of arts, literature, language learning, audiovisual creation. Muito bom. E para finalizar, mais cedo, amanhã, às 16 horas, teremos a apresentação do grupo de pesquisa sobre Internationalization at Home, certo? Então, aguardo todos amanhã aqui às 2 horas. Obrigada.